Hey guys, welcome back. As promised, I wanted to bring you guys a quick video on my initial thoughts of the Neptune Trident. As many of you guys know, I used to have a really tiny 55-gallon aquarium and I had very minimal equipment operating it. I was responsible for conducting all of my testing or hiring a professional to come do it when they would service the tank. Now that I've upgraded to my Red Sea Reefer 425 XL 112 gallon, I definitely wanted to make sure I had all of the proper equipment to make this the smoothest transition and least amount of maintenance on my end. I just want to give complete credit and respect to all the people that like to do it the OG way and do hands-on testing for every item in their aquarium, but I will say that the Trident has had some pros and cons and has saved me a lot of time with not having to do minor testing every week along the way. So after having my Apex system installed, I was able to get my Trident calibrated and fully functioning so I could make sure that everything was working as it should. For me, I have the Trident testing for calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium, and it doses for calcium and alkalinity. I really had to just learn this Apex system in general. I don't really find that it's that user-friendly until you finally understand what all the little gadgets and buttons mean. I know they have like little tours, but I just didn't have time to like personally walk through all of those. I did have LAX Aquarium install my Trident, install all the software, and so it has been helpful to be able to reach out to them for any questions that I have had regarding my system. But overall, like when everything was first set up, I was happy with it. So the first issue that I had with the Trident wasn't a big deal, but it is something to at least be aware of so that you guys are not here wasting time like I did. Even though I had the Trident professionally installed, I had my skimmer off because I had been dosing the tank earlier that morning and wanted to leave the skimmer off for a few hours. So the water line was actually clipped on the side of the sump, and I thought that it was submerged, and then all of a sudden the next day it was saying that there's error code, it wouldn't test, test failure A, test failure B, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, it just worked yesterday, like why is it not working today? So I pretty much jumped through a ton of hoops just to realize that when I had turned my skimmer back on, it drew more water out of my sump, which then lowered the water level. And because the water line was clipped onto the top of the side of the sump, it was not reaching the water. So essentially, it was showing the error code because it wasn't able to draw in the proper water sample. So even though it looked like it was perfectly connected, I just didn't even know that it wasn't touching the water. So I feel that based on how flimsy and skinny the water line is, it might be a little bit more user-friendly to have something that's actually more submergible versus like you're just clipping it on the side of your sump. Didn't really care for the clip, but it's not the end of the world. As soon as I got the water line submerged in the water, everything worked out, everything was testing as fine, and we were well on our way to maintaining my stability. The second issue that I had with the Trident occurred about a week later. I hired a service person to come service my tank, and when I opened up my system to shut all the pumps off so that he could do a proper service, it kept saying that I was not connected to my Apex Fusion. And I was like, that's weird, like why isn't it not connected? I can see everything. And so every time I would go to switch something off, it would slide back on as if I didn't change the setting. I then got a notification on my app saying that my Apex has disconnected 152 times in the last 24 hours, and then by later that day it had disconnected, I think it was like 242 times or something like that within the past 24 hours. So I was like, wow, like I know with COVID there's been a lot of network issues, internet issues, but I just can't imagine my internet has gone out that much when everything else that's operating on my wireless internet was working just fine. So I felt a little bit frustrated when I continued to make attempts to reach the manufacturer. Of course, you have to make a ticket, it's a whole production, but I was just getting worried because I didn't know what that really meant for my aquarium that day. I didn't know if it had fully disconnected and the things weren't gonna actually work on schedule, or if they were gonna just stay on schedule, but I just couldn't change any of my settings or turn any of my lights off or pumps off manually. I didn't know what that meant. The downside is, of course, I had to pay the service person for coming out for nothing, so I lost money because of this disconnect. But there was also a note on my Apex system that said that although this was a rare issue, it's something that they've seen before, and so as long as they make a ticket number, it could be handled. So I went ahead and did that, and I waited, and I became increasingly worried. So I went ahead and reached out to LAX Aquarium for help. They were wonderful because they were actually able to connect me directly to someone to speak that day. And in speaking with that rep, they were able to basically acknowledge that somehow my system was literally thrown off from the server, and in order to fix it, they literally had to go in and like reprogram my entire system and like switch over all of my settings from an old profile to a new profile. So this actually wasn't anything that I could have fixed on my end on my own. And when I asked them, like, if this happens again, like, is there anything that I can do? There are some alternative ways that you can log into like the local network to try and force it. But he was like, if you can't even log in that way, which was what had happened that day, he was like, you're probably gonna have to reach out to us again. But again, it was a really rare common issue, but I'm so grateful that I was able to get a hold of someone that day so that they could fix it, because even they were just like, whoa, like this is weird. So, other than the money lost from the service person not being able to do their job, but making the effort to come all the way out here and bring all the tools and the water and stuff for me, I didn't really lose out on anything. Like nothing died, everything continued to operate, which made me feel at least like a little bit safe about this. And I think the blessing out of that situation was that my aquarium was at least running properly at the time it got disconnected, versus me having anything off and then it just never got to reconnect back on. So like that was the bright side. Personally, I know like the more we dab into future technology and easier ways to do things, it can come with problems like these. But once I got that resolved, I haven't had any other issues with the Trident. I feel very secure that I can literally like go anywhere, and as long as I have internet, I can see the status of how my tank is running and the parameters of what it's testing and the heat, and whether my ATK is running or whether my return pump is working. This is really important to me to have something that I can monitor. It's kind of like a little baby monitor for me, so I can just make sure at all times things are working. Especially with this tank, I invested a lot in it. This was my law school graduation to myself, and the last thing I would want is to have a beautiful tank running and then all of a sudden something's failing and I can't even fix it because I don't even know what's happening until something is too late. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I wish that they had a much better customer service line. Like I hated that I had to call a retailer to reach a rep for me. They have their call-in number, but I had tried calling it for both issues and wasn't able to reach anyone. I left voicemails, never got a call back. The only thing I could do was get a response for a ticket, and in that response, they finally responded and they weren't going to be able to even call me for several days. So I don't know if this is just a situation of them being impacted because of COVID-19 or if this is just how it normally is. But I just wish that for the amount that people spend with their company, that they could have much better customer service and a return, because we all know that when things go wrong with our aquariums, time is of the essence, and we don't have sometimes 3 days to wait for a call back. Like we could lose a lot in between them. So 1, make sure your water line is fully submerged. 2, make sure that your internet is okay, and if you are experiencing a lot of outages, I would avoid fooling around with your settings. I would just kind of like leave it until the outage is kind of soft, just to make sure if anything is thrown off the system that you're not having things off your aquariums versus on. And 3, that if you do decide to get a Trident and if you do run into problems, just know that it is not easy to reach someone right away. And so I wish I had known that. But the biggest question out of all of this is, with these situations and with what I know about their customer service, would that deter me from getting this in the first place had I known? No, I would still have got this. I think it's still worth the peace of mind, and the less stress you have to face when you're running a major aquarium. But again, these are just my initial thoughts. I might feel differently in 6 months. I will definitely come back in the future to do an update for you guys, but I know some people feel differently about it. Some people want other systems that suit what they're looking for better. Some people might feel like it's a waste of money. They've been doing reefing the old school way. They don't need to invest in anything like this. But I do think that for people who are, maybe you could say, beginners to equipment, like this gives us a lot of peace of mind. But for people who maybe are a little bit more familiar with all sorts of equipment and scenarios, then you may not need this, but to each their own. So that's all I have to say for this. I hope that this answered a few questions that maybe some people might have, or at least raised a few notions that maybe you can think about if you're looking to invest in the Trident. If anyone has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them if you want to leave them in the comments below. And with that, keep on reefing, and I'll see you guys at the next one.